What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are making one of the baddest signs we've ever made before, and we made a barter deal, so I'm getting a new bow. As always guys, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell icon. We got a bunch of cool stuff coming up, bigger projects, we got business videos coming out, we doing the podcast, all kinds of stuff. When you like and subscribe, it really helps with the algorithm and gets our stuff in front of new people, so do us a solid. So here's the deal guys, everybody wants to sell their projects, right? And making money is great, but sometimes a bartering system works even better. There's a local archery shop down here called Desert Archery in Kingman, Arizona, and I've been in there several times. Awesome people, they got a great selection, everything. I approached them and said, hey, this is what we do. Would you guys be willing to work out a trade deal? I'm looking for a new bow. Left my card. A couple weeks later, I got a call and they said, yeah, let's talk about it. So they set me up with a 2021 Hoyt Ventum 33. This is so much better than the bow I have now. So here's something to think about when it comes to bartering. Now, they probably would have never called, or maybe they didn't even think about getting a wood sign, but because I approached them and they have stuff of value that interests me that I'd like to have, and I have a skill that they don't have, they can get something that they'd like, it works out. So this might have never turned into a sale for cash, but because they have what I want and I have what they'd like to have, we can barter. So just keep that in mind as you're making your stuff. Say like, okay, I like this shop, they have this, maybe this reel or this bow or whatever. I wonder if they'd be interested in trade. All they can do is say no, guys. And luckily, this one worked out. So let's make this board and get to work. The first thing we wanted to do is cut our boards to 5 feet. Now that's much bigger than the sign is actually going to be, but it gives us some room to work. Then we take off all the rounded milled edges because we want our seams to be as flawless as possible. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Our normal way is we cut off the edge with a table saw, run it through the planer to get a nice flat surface, and then we take them through the joiner. Now once you do this, that doesn't mean every edge is going to match up. So you want to make sure and mess around with your boards, find out what seams look the best with which other boards, and also how you want the boards to look. But make sure you get it all set out before you glue anything. Then we just set up our clamps, got everything put in the order we want, and we glued the crap out of this thing. Make sure you use a lot of glue. You want good squeeze out on top and bottom. To fill the knot holes and cracks in the board, we mixed sawdust from the board itself and wood glue, and this made a really nice paste. Now when you do this, you got to be careful not just to skim over the top, because what that'll do is just trap air in there, and once you sand it off, you're going to see the cracks anyway. So you want to try to get this paste down inside the cracks as far as you can. The next day, I came out, took all the clamps off, and spent about 45 minutes sanding both sides. Now this is important. Make sure you sand the back. It's easy to neglect that, but you don't want to have to wait until everything's done and then realize that you forgot to sand it. So sand the back first, then flip it over and sand the front. You want to get a good smooth surface for the layout. Dad and I had kind of a debate on whether we should do the carbon paper method or the inkjet transfer method. And this turned out to be about 9 pages, so the inkjet transfer really worked well. If you do not know how to do this, I'll put a link up here in the corner and you can check out a full video that gives all the details on it. The first bit we used was the profile bit at 3/16 of an inch deep. Now, I kind of did this different than I normally do. Normally, I would do the hardest part first, which will be the arrow. But there was a lot of outset pieces in this, and what that means is those are pieces that are going to be wood colored, and then the black will be behind that.
I wanted to make sure not to miss any of these, and that was kind of on the front of my mind, so I decided to do these first. I went in and did all the outset pieces first, and then went back and did the outline. Now, sometimes big signs intimidate people, but big signs are actually easier to do because small fine detail, when you make it bigger, it's easier to see the lines and it's bigger detail. So there's not as many sharp curves, not as many thin lines. So if you're kind of nervous about doing a big sign, it's actually a little bit easier than a smaller sign. There's just more of it. I carved this sign for probably about 6 hours, something like that. And so in the interest of time, I'm just going to time lapse this bad boy and let you guys enjoy some sweet music. Carving this arrow was pretty tough because it was long, straight lines. And one of these boards was super duper grainy, so it was hard to keep a straight line. I didn't want to really tell you guys, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. Dad helped me out on this one a little bit. Once the arrow was carved, then I used the 1/8 inch spiral upcut bit and I went and made it a completely flat background because this is going to get filled with epoxy. The last bit we used on this one was the 90-degree bit at 1/4 inch deep. Now, your depth is important. I wanted a lot of detail in this and I wanted to make sure there was a good contrast in the depth. So 1/4 inch deep was the way to go. Now in the elk, I went back and I marked everything with a Sharpie that was going to come out. And there was a couple times where I almost took something out that I wasn't supposed to. So when you do something like this, make sure you know what you're cutting.
Okay guys, we got all this carving done. Took a few hours, but I'm pretty stinking happy with the way it looks. So we wanted to do a live edge look, but a live edge board this size, pretty stinking expensive. We're gonna do a faux live edge on this. We're gonna do a freeform shape on the top and the bottom, then we're gonna use the grinder to give it a texture and stain it. Let's get going.
This is the perfect example of why you want to make your board bigger than your sign's actually going to be. I wasn't sure exactly how much space we would have on each side, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't make it too small. The way I am, I need a line to follow. Most guys could probably just kind of cut it with a saw, but for me, it made it a lot easier to have a line there. Then we used the jigsaw and we put it at a pretty steep angle so it looked like a real live edge board. This really pushed this little jigsaw, but it worked out well.
Alright guys, so we got our shape cut. Putting that jigsaw at that much of an angle really put a strain on that thing. It gave it all it had and it worked, but now we got to let it cool off. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give the live edge texture, and what I'm going to use to do that is actually a metal wheel. We tried a lot of different things the other day trying to kind of get what we think would look best, and this turned out to give it the best live edge texture. I'm basically just going to carve the crap out of it till I think it looks good, which is pretty much how I do everything. So let's get started.
The hardest part of this process was knowing when enough was enough. It's really easy for me to say, that's not good enough, and then I keep going and going, and next thing I know, it's like, wow, that was way too much. So just take your time when you do something like this. Make sure it just kind of looks cool, and remember, it's going to be the whole effect of the sign. Nobody's going to really focus on one particular little thing unless they're super analytic, but you're looking for the entire effect, and this worked out really, really well. To get the bark look, we use dark walnut stain, and I tried a few different ways of doing this. The best way I found, and it was actually Dad's idea, is to brush it on with a little paintbrush and then use a rag to wipe off the excess. That way it still has kind of that contrast, it looks nice and dark, but it's not dripping down. The next thing we did is tape off where we wanted to spray. The last thing you want to do with a situation like this is to get overspray on your bark. Then you got to sand it off or try to restain it, or you got to mess around with it. So using the tape and taking the little bit of time to tape it off is really, really worth it. It can save you a huge headache in the end. Once the primer was dry, I took all the tape off and sanded it. I started with a 60 grit disc and then went back with 120 to give it a smooth finish. Now, something about these big signs like this, it's really easy to hit the edge of your art or your letters with the disc. So you want to make sure to keep it as flat as possible.
Alright guys, so everything's carved. It's sprayed, it's sanded, everything's filled. Now it's time for the epoxy pour. I was a little nervous about doing orange epoxy just because this is a redwood board, so I wasn't sure how it would look, but we found some orange pigment that I think is going to look pretty cool. So let's give it a shot.
One thing you want to make sure to do before you pour your epoxy in something like this where it's just going to be a part of the sign, do your finish first. I don't care if you're putting 30 coats of finish on there. Do the finish first and then pour your epoxy. Because if you try to spray finish over epoxy, it's going to dull it really, really bad. Once that was done, we just taped everything off and we poured really, really carefully. Now, there were a couple of little drips, but Dad decided to try to use this razor scraper and get those drips off, and it worked perfect. You can't even tell they were there.
Oh, wow.
Is that what you were looking for?
That's exactly
what I thought it would be. That's beautiful.
Yeah?
That's way better than I thought it was going to be.
Heck,
Oh, that's really good.
I don't want to put it over there. I want to take that sign down and put it over there.
All right, guys. So Todd, Denise, you guys like it?
Yes, it's amazing.
Awesome,
All the
man.
engraving in the middle.
Good job on that.
Well, thank you. You guys ready to set up a bow?
We're ready to set up a bow.
All right, let's do it.
You know which one you want?
I know which one I want.
Okay.
Yes, I do. All right, guys, so there it is. Desert Archery got an awesome looking sign that they really happy with, and I got an awesome shooting bow that I'm not very good with, but that's what practice is for. So guys, I will leave a link in the description below for all the stuff we used today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions at all, email me, Ryan@makeawoodssign.com, or you can email Dad, Eric@makeawoodssign.com, and we'll see you guys on the next one.